For this tutorial, we're going to look at 3D widgets and talk about how we can use them in our projects. And I figured the best way to do this would be to make like a little project out of it. So this is going to be a little bit longer of a tutorial, but hopefully it will be a little bit clearer because we can actually see something at the end of it. So as you can see here, I have my character in a first-person game. And I have a click me thing here. And so by the end of this, we should be able to have a 3D interactable widget here that you can kind of think as being, like a door panel or a pop, like basically something, anything 3D that you want to interact with. And in this particular case, we're going to use it to raise and lower this plane here, or actually this flattened cube, that kind of is acting as a door for us. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we need to do is we need to understand that we're going to need two major components here. One is going to be a widget component in our target blueprint, and the other one is going to be a widget interaction component on our character, our pawn that we're going to use. So I selected my character here, and I hit Control B so that I can navigate real quick to its blueprint. I'm going to jump inside, and I'm going to show you, we're going to redo what I did basically, so that you guys can see where I'm plugging this in for the this tutorial and what exactly I'm doing. So over here on the left-hand side, we've got all the components of the first-person character by default that are there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new component, widget interaction. And I'm specifically going to parent this to the first-person camera so that wherever I'm looking, center of the screen is where the interaction is going to be physically. On the right-hand side here, I'm going to make sure I show debug so that I can actually see where I'm aiming. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zero this out, because right now it added it. When I parented it, it stayed relative to the 0 center of my object. But I really want this to actually be 0, 0, 0 so that it's dead center of my camera that I parented to. And that way when I'm looking around, if I move this down just slightly, if I'm looking around, you can see that this actually follows our view. So as our camera tilts, so does our control here. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to override, just for this project, our spawn projectile. So normally what you see here is you have, when you pull the trigger, you'll fire a round for your first-person character. I'm overriding it after the play montage just so that I can make sure I physically see that the gun is being triggered, or the button is being triggered. And I'm going to drag a copy of my widget interaction in, and I'm going to use this to trigger my press. So I'm going to type in pointer, and we're going to use both of these, press and release pointer key. So first one I'm going to do is press pointer key. I'm going to make the key into my mouse left button, and I will wire this up. And then I will also drag out from here a pointer release, and I will make that the same left mouse button. And I'm going to attach this to the input action fire released key. So this will trigger, this here will trigger the pointer release. I'm going to compile that, and that's really all we have to do on the player end for this tutorial to get everything working. The next thing I need to do is I need to start reconstructing what we saw here, and we're going to do that by making a couple things. So the first thing we need to make is we're going to need to make a widget that can act as a button, something that we can interact with. So I will make a new widget here on my in my content area. User interface, widget blueprint, and I will name this. I'll name this button widget blueprint. Jump inside there, and I'm going to make this real simple. I'm going to toss a button in there. I'm going to anchor it to the center, and the reason I'm anchoring it to the center is just I have found that the that when you do 3D widgets, when you do widget components, for some reason it uses the center of the widget space here as where it anchors kind of the center of itself. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to move it to the left here a little bit. So minus 50, and then again half up. So minus 20. And now it's centered in the center of our screen. And I will drag on some text. I will make this click me. Click me. Change the color, that's something a little bit darker. And I'm going to change the size of this down so that it fits inside of the button. In this case, 12. And we can scale this up inside of our blueprint. So for now, we got that. I'm going to compile this, and I'm going to put this up here. I'll close the first person. So we're gonna come back here, and we're gonna be doing some things in the graph. But let's get this button attached first to the blueprint that we're gonna make this into. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add myself in a blueprint class, and I'm specifically going to do this built off of the parenting concept from one of my previous tutorials. So I'm going to first just make myself a general interactable blueprint. I'm going to pop in here, and I'm going to add in an event graph. I'm just going to add in a function, custom function, interact. And I'm going to give myself a print statement, primarily so that I know debugging-wise if I've remembered or not to override this function later on in the child. So calling parent interactable interact event. Oops. Oh. Interact event. There we go. Now if I trigger this in the child, if I haven't remembered to put anything, I will trigger this warning for myself. Right, and that's all I need to do for my my parent class. I'll close that, and I will make myself a new blueprint again. And this time, instead of making an actor for my parent, I'm going to type in interactable blueprint. And so I'm going to grab that one. And this one is going to be sliding, whoops, rename you, sliding door blueprint. All right, so here we are inside of our sliding door blueprint. And like I said, now we want to add ourselves a widget component. And we will set this to our button widget blueprint. And you can see here we got this nice gigantic click me button. So I can compile this, and I can see this if I drag in sliding door blueprint. It's going to be facing away from us, so I'll have to rotate it. But I have this nice giant click me. Alright, so that guy exists now. So the first thing we're going to do then on our way to making this door is we're going to connect the widget blueprint to its parent. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to have an initial time. We're going to call it once right at the beginning of play, and we're going to tell it what its parent is. Because we know it's attached here, but the instance, whatever it is, whatever instance of that blueprint is, doesn't really know who's owning it and where it's, who's added it to the world, and it needs to know that. So over here in our widget blueprint, we're in the graph section now. I'm going to click, and I'm going to type in custom event. I'm going to add in an event set parent. And I'm going to add to this, I'm going to add an input. I am going to add an object reference. Just a generic object reference. I will call this parent ref. And I will promote this to a variable, which I will save as, you've guessed it, parent reference. And that's all set. So I don't need any of these guys. I'm going to get rid of them for cleanliness. So now I can set my reference to my parent, which means that if I want to, if I trigger something in here, I can go back to my parent. And we can test that out by getting this, get a reference to this, cast to, and since we know that this particular blueprint is going to be you know, controlled by, or this version of this widget will be controlled by, you know, our sliding door. We're going to cast to sliding door blueprint. And if the cast fails, we will spit out a reference. We will just put out a print statement that cast from widget failed. If it succeeds, let's trigger that interaction. So as our sliding door blueprint interact. And so now we just need an event here. Well, I will click on my button then. Button 52 is what it's called for me. I will go back to my designer and I will rename this. This is going to be just called door button. There we go. And so back here in the graph, we now have an event down here we can grab, onClicked. So I'm going to grab an onClicked event and add it to my blueprint here, and my event graph here. And I'm going to add this in to cast a sliding door blueprint. Going to compile this, and we can immediately test this out to see that this portion is working. By going through play, I'm going to go up to here, and I'm going to click on it. And we're going to get that little warning of our cast has failed, because I haven't yet actually indicated what the parent is. I have yet to actually call this. So it's currently failing because this is actually an empty reference right now. It's null. So this portion works, at least this portion now works. So let's go back to our sliding door blueprint. And this is kind of, you kind of going to do a back and forth. A lot of times you're making any kind of blueprints that are going to interact with each other well. Back here in the event graph, we have to do this from the event graph, not the construction script, unfortunately. There's this particular node we need to grab that we don't have access to in the construction script. So I'm going to drag myself a widget reference. I'm going to drag out from here, get user widget object. And this is the particular node that does not exist anymore in the construction script. It used to. So apparently in older versions, I think it's like the 15 and back, maybe even 16 and back, you could do it out of here, and you can say get user widget, and you could get it in the construction script. No longer. You have to do it in the event graph. So I will attach this to my begin play portion. So I'm going to drag out from here, cast to button widget blueprint. I will connect that to my parent begin play. And as my button blueprint, I am going to set parent. There's my function. So I connected that up, and then for my reference, I'm going to drag out of here and type in a reference to self. So now I will tell it who I am, who owns this particular version of this widget. And now if I compile this and we play it, hopefully this won't fail. There we go. So we just so we clicked on the button, it cast back to its owning blueprint, and we got the parent default interaction calling parent interactable interact event. That ridiculously long text that I typed in just to remind myself that I do need to actually connect this and override it in my current blueprint. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll get rid of these guys because I don't need them. And what I will do here is I will, on the left-hand side here, under Functions, I will click on the Override, and I will scroll down to Interact. I will grab my Interact function. And we can test that this is the right one. I'm just going to give myself a new string to say, I am child. Compile that. Double check. All right, so there we go. So technically we've done it. We've connected the two. So from here, I will basically be recreating the final door portion that you see over here. And this is going to involve the use of a timeline, really to make it kind of smooth and such. So the first thing I'm going to do to this blueprint is I'm going to add in a cube. I'm going to rename this door. And I am going to scale its x down significantly. So let's scale this down to like 0.1. Move it back ever so slightly, just so that I can see it behind my blueprint there, or my widget there. And I'm going to move it up a little bit too. Yep, and it's resting on the ground now. And then I will take my widget and I will move it up a little bit. And I will move this to the side. And it doesn't really need to be quite that big, so 250 by 250 is probably fine. Guess it needs to be a little bit smaller than that. Oh. All right, I'm going to scale this guy down by about half, because it doesn't quite need to be that big. I'll leave it right there for now. So back in our event graph, I'm going to delete my print string, and from here I'm going to add in a flip-flop actually. And a flip-flop is really nice for doors, especially sliding doors, because the idea is the first time this flip-flop is triggered, it will execute A. The next time it's triggered, it will execute B. And this is really handy when you combine it with the timeline node, which, if you haven't seen, this in itself is an extremely powerful node that is really useful for any time you want to have any kind of smooth transitions or changes. So I'm going to rename this from timeline 0 to door animation. And I'm going to plug in A to play, and I'm going to plug in B to reverse. And what this means is from wherever we are in this timeline, we'll play from here, and wherever we are, if we hit it again, we'll reverse backwards through it. And so with this node, I can double click on it, and I will get a new window here, and I can basically add in floats, vectors, etc. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a float, because I'm going to use this to control a lerp. And I'm going to make the length of this like 2 seconds. Whoops. Let's get rid of that. 2 seconds. Right click to add in a keyframe. Right click again to add in a second keyframe, and I'll just set these manually. At time 0, I want the value to be 0, and at time 2, I want the value to be 1. There we go. And so if I name this lerp value, I can go back to my event graph, and I will see I now have a float output of lerp value, which we can actually test to see what it's going to do. Just a real quick print statement, just to show you guys. If I ran this, hit play, click on this, you'll see it's going up, and then it goes down. I'll click it again. And if the idea though is if I click in between, I can change this the direction it's going, which basically gives me that really smooth transition. If I were to connect to play from start or play from or reverse from end, then it would start at one or the other, and if we try to change the door's direction like mid-travel, it would look really janky because it would instantly teleport somewhere. The other thing I need to do is I need to get myself just a reference to this door so that I can actually keep track of where it starts out at. So in this I'm going to actually get relative location, and I'm going to promote this to a variable here. And this is going to be door start position. And I'm going to run this right after I actually set my parent. So this is running off of the event begin play, and after I save, or after I send my widget its parent information, I'm going to save the door start position. I'm going to delete the print string, and I'm going to delete this little node here. And what I will do here is I will, from this same door part, I will grab and I will say set relative location. And so now every time it updates, I want to update its new location. And I will do this using a lerp. So I'll right click, type in lerp, and I don't want the float lerp, I actually want lerp, I want the vector lerp. And I will grab a reference to this variable I grabbed for its start position, and I want to lerp between its start position, put this down here, and I'm going to add in a value. Since I know this cube is 100 high, I will just add in 100 for now. And so it's going to be plus vector. So vector plus vector, and I will add in a z height of 100. I will plug that into my second value, and then I will use this lerp value as my alpha. And then I will plug in this node into my new location. Now if I compile this and run, I can walk up to the door, and we can see that it is now transitioning smoothly up and down. And if I click in between, it will change directions wherever it currently is. And so if I were to actually position this on the floor properly, while this may be a smaller door than the one I made, the concept is the same, where I could technically then, travel past it or underneath it. An example on the larger door, right there. The benefit of creating these kind of things like this is that by creating one of these doors like this into a single blueprint, you can effectively make yourself a tool that you can just populate, hallways and rooms and such with doors that can be easily interacted with. Because I can just drag in more copies of this, rotate it around, and I will control drag, alt drag, there we go. Control C, Control V, so I have another copy of it. And each one of these will control their own separate door. You could do something where you use tags, and you could have one of these, like if it were on a computer console somewhere, it could control multiple doors, but that's something that you can basically grow off of this kind of a project. This is just kind of to show you how to combine the interactability of like a 3D widget and actually have it do something to a parent blueprint.